There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't scream. It just sits there, quiet, heavy. You keep going, but something feels off, like you've been left behind without anyone saying goodbye. And the hardest part? You start wondering if it's personal, if you did something wrong, if you missed a step. Here's the uncomfortable thought most people avoid. What if this season isn't rejection at all? What if it's something far more intentional and far more demanding? The Bible presents several moments where silence, distance, and isolation aren't signs of abandonment, but stages of preparation. Not answers, not comfort, just space. And space can be terrifying when you don't know what it's for. So the real question isn't why this is happening. It's what this season might be shaping without your permission. Stay with me, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. When silence starts to weigh on you, I'll be honest right from the start, silence can be unsettling. Not the peaceful kind that shows up at the end of a long day, but the heavier one. The kind that arrives quietly and stays longer than expected. Messages slow down, invitations fade, life keeps moving, but somehow it feels emptier. The Bible presents moments like this not as clear punishment, but as setting. And setting matters more than we usually admit. In many biblical narratives, silence shows up before something meaningful happens. There's no dramatic miracle music playing in the background, no immediate breakthrough, just a pause, a waiting space. You see this pattern in different stories, seasons where people are set apart, slowed down, or pushed into solitude. Not as a universal rule for every believer, but as a recurring narrative movement, which raises an uncomfortable question: is every experience of loneliness really rejection? Think about the prophets of the ancient Near East. They lived in deeply communal cultures where belonging wasn't optional, it was survival. To be isolated wasn't just emotionally painful, it was socially dangerous. When a prophet found himself alone, away from the city or the temple, that loneliness was physical. Dust clinging to the skin, heat pressing down, thirst lingering in the throat. The text suggests that this isolation didn't erase their calling, but it exposed their humanity. There's a scene that repeats itself across Scripture. Someone prays, waits, and nothing happens right away. No clear answer, no spiritual fireworks, just time passing. Some scholars understand these moments as mirrors, not mirrors meant to shame, but to reveal. They reveal expectations, hidden fears, and dependencies that noise and routine usually keep buried. And this is where it touches real life. Loneliness often shows up when life slows down, when routines lose their excitement, when work becomes mechanical, productivity dips, or mental health quietly asks for attention, even when we'd rather ignore it. This isn't a spiritual diagnosis, it's an honest reflection. Sometimes silence simply creates space to notice what's been neglected. Maybe the hardest part isn't being alone. Maybe it's losing the distractions that keep us from ourselves. That's uncomfortable, because suddenly there are questions we can't answer quickly. I've caught myself trying to fill that space with anything available. Or maybe that's not exactly it, now that I think about it. Sometimes the space itself is doing something important. What if this silence isn't the end of the story, but the beginning of refinement? Let that sit for a moment, because what comes next shifts everything. The desert was never an accident. This part is harder to say out loud, but here it goes. In Scripture, solitude is rarely random. The desert especially keeps showing up like an unwanted character that refuses to leave the story. Moses doesn't meet God in the comfort of Egypt's palaces, but after 40 years tending sheep in obscurity. The text suggests that the desert wasn't a detour. It was part of the formation, not glamorous, not efficient, just necessary. In the ancient world, the desert wasn't poetic. It was dangerous, no shade, no safety net. You didn't wander there to find yourself. You went there because something forced you out of familiar structures. When biblical writers talk about the wilderness, they're not romanticizing isolation. They're describing a place where control disappears fast. And maybe that's the point the narrative keeps circling back to. Jesus himself enters that space. Before teaching crowds, before miracles become public, the Gospels place him alone in the wilderness. Different Christian traditions read this moment in different ways, but the sequence matters. Silence comes before visibility, hunger before affirmation. The text doesn't rush it. 40 days pass slowly. Temptation isn't loud, it's subtle, practical, almost reasonable. That detail matters more than we think. What's striking is that nothing productive happens there by modern standards. No career growth, no measurable output, just resistance, discernment and clarity forming under pressure. That challenges the way we evaluate seasons in our own lives. We're trained to measure worth by momentum, by progress, by visible results. The desert offers none of that. And still, Scripture treats it as meaningful. This is where the story quietly confronts us. What do we do when life feels unproductive? When routines shrink instead of expand? When relationships thin out and we're left with long stretches of quiet, not as punishment, not as proof of failure, just as a season that refuses to be rushed? The Bible doesn't tell us to enjoy it. It simply doesn't let us skip it. I'll admit, this is uncomfortable. We want explanations. We want timelines. But the desert narratives resist both. They ask for presence instead of answers, endurance instead of clarity, and maybe, just maybe, they're preparing the ground for something that wouldn't survive any other environment. Because once you leave the desert, you're never the same person who entered it. And that realization opens a much deeper question about what refinement actually costs when God seems quiet but not absent. I need to be careful here because this is where people usually jump to conclusions. Silence easily gets labeled as absence. But biblically speaking, those two ideas aren't always the same thing. In fact, the text often separates them. There are moments when God is clearly active in the story, yet noticeably quiet in the experience of the person living it. That tension sits right at the heart of many biblical narratives. Take Elijah, for instance. He lives in a violent, unstable period of Israel's history, under kings who actively oppose prophetic voices. After a dramatic public confrontation, he ends up alone, exhausted and afraid. The story doesn't rush past his emotional collapse. He hides, he sleeps, he complains. And when God finally engages, it's not through fire or wind, but through a low whisper. The narrative suggests that divine presence doesn't always match human expectations. What's interesting is how disappointed Elijah seems before that moment. He expected clarity, resolution, maybe even relief. Instead, he gets questions. Direction, yes, but not comfort in the way he imagined. Some theologians point out that this scene reframes power. It's not always loud, not always overwhelming. Sometimes it's precise, quiet, and deeply unsettling because it demands attention. That subtlety matters for real life. When answers don't arrive quickly, we tend to assume something's wrong with us, with our faith, with God. But the biblical pattern complicates that assumption. Silence doesn't automatically signal distance. It can signal intention, not to confuse, but to refine how someone listens, what they're listening for, and why. I've noticed that silence has a way of stripping away spiritual shortcuts. You can't rely on emotional highs. You can't borrow certainty from someone else's experience. You're left with prayer that feels slower, scripture that feels heavier, and questions that linger longer than you'd like. It's uncomfortable, and maybe that's exactly why it works. Here's the unsettling thought the text leaves hanging. What if the quiet isn't meant to be filled immediately? What if it's shaping a kind of listening that noise would ruin? Refinement hurts more than rejection. This is where the story gets uncomfortable, so I won't soften it. Rejection wounds the ego, but refinement reaches deeper. Rejection says, "You're not wanted." Refinement says, "You're not ready yet." And honestly, that second sentence is harder to live with. Scripture doesn't hide that tension. It lets it sit in the room, heavy and unresolved, forcing the reader to wrestle with it instead of escaping. Look at Joseph's story, not as a children's tale, but as ancient survival literature. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, imprisoned unjustly, and all of this in a culture where family was identity, protection, and future. The text doesn't rush to explain why this happened. It simply narrates the slow erosion of Joseph's assumptions about fairness, control, and timing. Nothing about it feels efficient or merciful in the moment. What stands out is that Joseph isn't passive. He works, he adapts, he leads where he can. But he doesn't get answers. No angelic explanation, no clear promise whispered at night. Just responsibility in small, unseen spaces. Some interpretations suggest that leadership was being shaped long before authority was given. Not as punishment, but as preparation that couldn't happen any other way. That challenges how we label our own seasons. We're quick to call anything painful rejection. A door closes, a relationship ends, influence shrinks, and the conclusion feels obvious. But the biblical narrative complicates that reflex. Sometimes the very thing that looks like exclusion is actually compression. Pressure applied slowly, deliberately, shaping something that would collapse if rushed. Here's the part we rarely say out loud. Refinement doesn't feel meaningful while it's happening. It feels unfair, lonely, pointless, and the Bible doesn't argue with that feeling, it records it. The Psalms are full of honest complaints that never get immediate resolution. Faith in those moments looks less like confidence and more like stubborn endurance. So here's the question that lingers without an answer. How many things do we call rejection simply because we can't yet see what they're forming? That question matters because the next part of the story shifts from pain to purpose in a way most people miss. What gets stripped away in the quiet. This might sound strange, but solitude doesn't just remove people. It removes illusions. And that's usually the part we resist the most. In Scripture, quiet seasons have a way of peeling back layers that noise keeps nicely hidden. Status, certainty, even spiritual language starts to fall apart when there's no audience. What remains is often simpler and more uncomfortable. There's a pattern you start to notice if you read carefully. When people are pulled away from crowds, titles tend to lose their power. David is anointed king, but then sent back to the fields. Saul has the crown, but loses peace. The text doesn't frame this as irony for entertainment's sake. It suggests that identity, when built on position, doesn't survive isolation very well. In ancient cultures, especially in Israel's context, public recognition meant safety and future. To lose visibility was to lose leverage. So when biblical characters fade into the background, what's being tested isn't just patience, it's attachment. Attachment to outcomes, to timing, to the idea that progress must always be visible to be real. This is where silence does its quiet work. It exposes what we lean on when no one's watching. Prayer becomes less polished. Faith loses its slogans. You stop performing and start noticing what actually sustains you, or doesn't. And that realization can feel disorienting, because it turns out some things we called faith were really habits supported by momentum. I've seen this play out in ordinary life too. When routines slow, when productivity drops, when mental energy runs low, certain identities stop working. You can't hide behind busyness anymore. You're forced to confront questions like, who am I when nothing is being affirmed? Not as accusation, as reflection. And reflection takes time. The unsettling truth the text hints at is this. Some things must be removed before others can grow. Not because they're evil, but because they're in the way. And once those layers are gone, the story doesn't get easier, but it does get clearer. That clarity is where the next shift begins. The slow rebuilding. No one applauds. This is the part almost nobody talks about, because it doesn't make for a good highlight reel. After things are stripped away, after silence does its work, what comes next isn't immediate restoration. It's rebuilding, slowly, quietly, and usually without witnesses. Scripture doesn't glamorize this stage, but it doesn't skip it either. It lingers there longer than we'd like. Nehemiah's story captures this well. He returns to Jerusalem long after the damage is done. The walls are broken, the city vulnerable, the people discouraged. Historically, this is a fragile post-exile period, full of political tension and emotional fatigue. The rebuilding doesn't start with celebration. It starts with assessment, walking the ruins at night, taking inventory of what's actually left. What's striking is how practical the work becomes, brick by brick, family by family, everyone repairing the section of wall right in front of their house. No dramatic speeches every day, no constant reassurance, just consistency. Some biblical scholars point out that this is where faith shifts form, from belief under pressure to obedience in routine. And routine, honestly, is harder to romanticize. This stage feels painfully ordinary. You show up. You do what's in front of you. You don't know yet if it will matter. Opposition shows up, doubt creeps in, progress feels slow. The text doesn't hide that frustration. It records threats, exhaustion, and moments where quitting would have made sense. Rebuilding doesn't erase vulnerability. It happens alongside it. There's something deeply human here. After a quiet season, we often expect clarity to instantly produce momentum. But the Bible resists that idea. It suggests that maturity grows through repetition, not revelation alone. Through small, faithful choices that don't feel spiritual enough to post about. That's refinement continuing its work, just in a different form. Here's the tension the narrative leaves unresolved. What if the most important growth in your life happens when no one is watching? And no one ever claps? That question matters, because it sets up the final turn of the story. When timing finally makes sense, almost. I'll say this carefully because this is where people expect a clean payoff, and Scripture rarely gives one. When timing starts to shift, it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It sneaks in, often quietly enough that you almost miss it. One door opens, not 10. One conversation changes, not the whole story. The Bible presents these moments as subtle turns, not dramatic finales. Think about Joseph again, but later in the narrative. Years have passed. Power finally shows up. Authority, recognition, influence, all the things that were absent before. But the text spends surprisingly little time celebrating that shift. Instead, it zooms in on his internal response. When the past stands in front of him, his brothers, unaware, vulnerable, the real test isn't leadership, it's memory. Timing reveals character before it rewards faithfulness. What's striking is that Joseph himself admits confusion. He names meaning only in hindsight. Not during the pit, not during prison. Only later does he begin to articulate a larger picture, and even then, cautiously. The narrative suggests that clarity often trails obedience, not the other way around. And that's frustrating because we prefer explanations up front. This mirrors real life more than we'd like to admit. Sometimes things start aligning, but the scars remain. You move forward, but questions linger. You gain perspective, but not closure in every area. The Bible doesn't frame this as failure. It frames it as realism. Redemption doesn't erase history, it reframes it. Here's where refinement quietly proves its value. Without the silence, the stripping, the slow rebuilding, timing would destroy rather than serve. Influence without depth collapses. Opportunity without maturity corrodes. Scripture seems less concerned with when things happen and more concerned with who we've become when they do. So the unresolved tension stays with us. What if the delay wasn't about postponement at all, but alignment? That question doesn't demand an answer. It demands patience. Learning to live without constant answers. This is usually where impatience creeps back in. After timing starts to make a little sense, we expect clarity to follow in full. But the biblical story doesn't cooperate with that expectation. It slows down again. It suggests that even mature faith lives with unanswered questions. Not because something is missing, but because something deeper is forming. Look at Abraham late in his life. The promises exist. The journey is real. But certainty never becomes complete. Hebrews later reflects on this, noting that some promises were seen from a distance, not fully held. Historically, this matters. Ancient covenant language assumed trust over control. Abraham walks forward without having every detail explained, and Scripture doesn't treat that as a flaw. That challenges how we define spiritual growth. We often equate maturity with confidence, clarity, and decisiveness. Yet the Bible frequently presents maturity as endurance with ambiguity. Prayer continues, even when answers don't arrive on our schedule. Obedience continues, even when motivation fluctuates. Faith becomes less about feeling sure and more about staying present. This has practical implications that rarely get airtime. You can make wise decisions without total certainty. You can keep healthy rhythms without knowing where everything leads. You can tend relationships, work responsibly, and care for your mental and emotional health while still carrying questions. Scripture doesn't shame uncertainty. It normalizes it. There's a quiet humility that forms here. You stop demanding explanations for every season. You start paying attention to what's actually being asked of you today, not tomorrow, not 5 years from now. Just now. And strangely enough, that shift often brings more peace than answers ever did. So here's the question the narrative leaves unresolved on purpose. What if the goal was never certainty, but trust that can breathe in the unknown? That question sets the stage for how everything ultimately comes together. When community returns, but you're different, this is a strange moment in the story. And honestly, it's easy to overlook. After silence, after isolation, after all that internal reshaping, community slowly returns. Conversations pick up, relationships reappear, life starts to feel populated again, but something's off. Not in a bad way, just different. Scripture hints that reintegration can be just as challenging as isolation. You see this tension after exile narratives. People return to familiar places, but they're not the same people who left. Jerusalem is rebuilt, but memories linger. Expectations clash. Some rejoice, others mourn. The Bible doesn't smooth that contrast out. It allows joy and grief to coexist in the same scene. That detail matters because it reflects how human re-entry actually works. What's subtle is how refined individuals often feel slightly out of step when they rejoin the crowd. Not superior, not distant, just more measured, less reactive, harder to impress. Silence has recalibrated their internal pace. And when noise returns, it doesn't carry the same authority it once did. The text suggests that this isn't loss, it's discernment. There's a practical side to this. After seasons of quiet, some conversations feel shallow, some conflicts feel unnecessary, some ambitions feel smaller. That doesn't mean disengagement is the answer. It means presence changes form. You listen more, speak less, choose words carefully. Community becomes a place to serve, not to prove anything. This can feel lonely in its own way. Being surrounded by people while carrying depth others haven't walked through yet creates distance. Scripture doesn't deny that discomfort. It simply shows that this tension is often where wisdom operates best, quietly, patiently, without the need to be understood by everyone. So the lingering question becomes this: how do you stay connected without shrinking what the quiet has shaped? That question prepares us for the final, most personal turn of the story. The quiet strength no one can take from you. This is where the story turns inward one last time. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. After refinement, after rebuilding, after re-entering community, something remains that didn't exist before, a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. Scripture doesn't give it a flashy name, but you recognize it when you see it. It's stability that doesn't depend on circumstances cooperating. You notice it in Paul's later letters. Historically, these are written under pressure, imprisonment, uncertainty, physical limitation, yet the tone shifts. There's less urgency to prove anything, less defensiveness. He doesn't deny suffering, but he refuses to let it define him. Some scholars suggest that this is what maturity looks like in the biblical sense. Not escape from hardship, but composure within it. What's important is that this strength isn't self-generated. It's shaped. It comes from walking through unanswered prayers, delayed outcomes, and long stretches of faithfulness that no one applauded. The text suggests that this kind of resilience can't be taught quickly. It's learned slowly, in places where shortcuts don't work. This has real-world implications that often get ignored. When you've been refined, panic loses its grip faster. External validation matters less. You still care, you're not numb, but you're not ruled by every shift in opinion or outcome. Decisions come from discernment, not desperation. That's not perfection, that's grounding. There's a quiet confidence here that doesn't need to win arguments or dominate conversations. It shows up in how you respond under pressure, in how you wait, in how you say no without guilt and yes without fear. Scripture frames this not as a rival, but as readiness, a posture that can handle whatever comes next. And here's the final unresolved question before the story closes. What if this strength was the real gift hidden inside the silence all along? When you finally name the season, this is where everything slows down one last time. Not because the story is ending, but because perspective has finally caught up with experience. Scripture often places naming at the end of a journey, not the beginning. People look back and give meaning to what once felt chaotic, not with full certainty, but with honesty, shaped by distance. You see this pattern when Israel reflects on the wilderness years. Much later, the texts interpret that season not just as survival, but as formation. Hunger, dependence, daily provision, all reread through time. Historically, this matters because these reflections weren't written in the desert but after it. Meaning emerges in retrospect, not in real time. What's striking is the restraint. The Bible doesn't reduce complex seasons to slogans. It resists clean explanations. Instead, it allows layered truth, hardship and growth, loss and clarity, confusion and purpose. Naming the season doesn't erase the pain, it contextualizes it. And that difference is everything. In real life, this often happens quietly. You realize you're no longer asking the same questions. Certain fears don't have the same volume. You stop needing constant reassurance. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because you're no longer defined by what didn't. The silence shaped something steadier than answers. There's humility here. You don't rush to explain your story to others. You hold it carefully. You know now that not every quiet season is meant to be fixed. Some are meant to be understood later. Scripture treats this awareness as wisdom, not closure. So here's the final question the narrative leaves hanging, intentionally unanswered. If this season was refinement, not rejection, how will you carry what it shaped into whatever comes next? Some seasons don't come with explanations, they come with shaping. And maybe that's the hardest truth to sit with. This story was never about liking the silence or romanticizing the desert. It was about realizing that not every quiet moment is a setback. Some are invitations to become someone who can carry what's coming next without breaking. If any part of this journey resonated with you, I'd love to know what part of the silence spoke the loudest. Share that in the comments. And if this reflection added something real to your perspective, consider subscribing to the channel, because the next video goes even deeper into how these hidden seasons affect our choices, relationships, and faith in ways we rarely talk about. Don't rush away from this moment. What comes next builds directly on what was just uncovered.